Hi, I'm Charlie, and this is History Connected. Thanks for taking a look at our new video series here, History 365. This video is for January, and we have 31 events in here, one per day, all in one short, concise video. If you like what you see, you learn something, give me a like and subscribe. If you want to comment, let me know what you thought the most interesting one was, and let me know if you knew a lot of these. A lot of these took me by surprise, so without further ado, let's roll the tape.
It's New Year's Day in Havana, but this isn't a celebration for everyone. In the early hours of January 1st, 1959, Fulgencio Batista, the dictator who ruled Cuba with an iron fist, flees the country under the cover of darkness. His regime, infamous for corruption and oppression, collapses as Fidel Castro's revolutionary forces march toward the capital. The streets fill with cheers as Castro enters Havana, but the revolution brings more than celebration. Land is seized, industries are nationalized, and dissent is crushed. Cuba's new path aligns with the Soviet Union, making this tiny island a central battleground in the Cold War. It's a cold winter evening in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The Silver Bridge, a critical link over the Ohio River, was packed with cars during rush hour. Suddenly, the unthinkable happens. A loud crack, then a cascade of metal and concrete. The entire bridge collapses, plunging vehicles and 46 people into the icy waters below. The cause? A single faulty eye-bar in the suspension chain, weakened by years of corrosion and neglect. The disaster devastates the community and exposes the hidden dangers of America's aging infrastructure. In the coal fields of Chala, India, the air is heavy with dust and danger. It's January 3rd, 1975, when an explosion deep underground ignites methane gas. The blast is devastating, but what follows is worse. Nearby waterlogged mine floods, drowning 372 miners in moments. The tragedy is a brutal reminder of the perilous conditions faced by coal miners and the cost of human lives in pursuit of industrial progress. The streets of London are alive with whispers of treason. King Charles I, desperate to secure his authority, has ordered the arrest of 5 members of Parliament. On January 4th, 1642, soldiers march into Westminster, but the accused have fled. The failure is public and humiliating for the king. This moment marks the beginning of a bitter conflict between the Crown and Parliament, setting England on the road to civil war. It's a quiet night in London, or so it seems. On January 5th, 1941, the sound of engines grow louder. German bombers fill the sky. Within minutes, the city is ablaze as bombs level homes and shatter lives. Over 150 civilians are killed in this single raid. The Blitz continues to test the resilience of Londoners who wake each morning to rebuild from the ashes. The air is bitterly cold, the land blanketed in snow. Thousands of Cherokee, exhausted and starving, stagger through the wilderness. It's January 6th, 1838, the end of a journey forced upon them by the U.S. government. The Trail of Tears has claimed the lives of more than 4,000 men, women, and children. Their ancestral lands are gone, taken under the Indian Removal Act. What remains is a legacy of suffering, displacement, and resilience. In a quiet Italian observatory, Galileo Galilei leans over his telescope. It's January 7th, 1610, and he's about to change the universe, or at least humanity's understanding of it. Through the lens, he sees 4 tiny moons orbiting Jupiter, a discovery that defies the Church's Earth-centered view of the cosmos. This moment sparks the scientific revolution and sets Galileo on a collision course with powerful religious authorities. The beaches of Galipoli are eerily silent. It's January 8th, 1916, and the Allies have completed their evacuation after months of bloodshed. Over 300,000 soldiers, British, Australian, New Zealanders, and Turks, have fallen in this catastrophic campaign. For the Anzac forces, Gallipoli becomes a symbol of sacrifice. For the Allies, it's a grim lesson in the futility of poorly planned warfare. In the midst of the Black Death, fear and superstition spread faster than the plague. On January 9, 1349, the Jewish community of Basel, Switzerland, is rounded up and massacred, falsely blamed for poisoning wells. Men, women, and children are burned alive, their homes destroyed. This brutal event is a grim reminder of how fear can lead to unimaginable cruelty, leaving a scar on history that endures. The ink is dry and the consequences are set in motion. On January 10, 1920, the Treaty of Versailles officially takes effect. Germany is saddled with crippling reparations and loss of territory, while the League of Nations is born, an ambitious attempt to maintain peace. But the seeds of resentment are sown, paving the way for the rise of Adolf Hitler and the eventual outbreak of another war. Smoke rises over the Arkansas River as Union forces bombard Fort Hindman. It's January 11, 1863, and the Confederate troops are vastly outgunned. By the end of the day, over 5,000 Confederate soldiers surrender, handing the Union a crucial victory in the Civil War. This battle secures Union control over the Mississippi River's supply lines, a critical blow to the Confederacy's hope of survival. It's just before 5 p.m. in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. The ground starts to tremble, and within seconds, the city collapses. A 7.0 magnitude earthquake strikes, killing over 230,000 people and leaving 1.5 million homeless. Buildings crumble, hospitals overflow, and the cries for help echo long after the shaking stops. The devastation reveals Haiti's vulnerability, sparking one of the largest international relief efforts in history. The air is thick with smoke and ash. On January 13, 1939, the Black Friday bushfires tear through the Australian state of Victoria, destroying over 2,000 homes and taking 71 lives. Entire towns are reduced to smoldering ruins. It's one of the worst natural disasters in Australian history, sparking reforms in fire management and leaving scars on the land and its people that still linger today. The battlefield stretches as far as the eye can see, covered in dust and blood. On January 14, 1761, the Maratha Empire clashes with the Afghan forces of Ahmad Shah Durrani in one of the bloodiest battles in Indian history. By the end of the day, over 100,000 soldiers and civilians lie dead. This defeat marks the decline of the Maratha Empire and a power shift that will eventually pave the way for British domination in India. It starts with a low rumble. Then, a steel tank holding 2.3 million gallons of molasses bursts, unleashing a sticky wave through the streets of Boston. It's January 15, 1919, and the neighborhood of North End is drowning in chaos. Buildings collapse, people are swept away, and 21 lives are lost. This bizarre tragedy leads to tighter industrial regulations, but for decades, the smell of molasses lingers in the air, a haunting reminder of the day sweetness turned deadly. It's a bitter winter day in Moscow, and the gilded domes of the Kremlin shine in the pale light. On January 16, 1547, Ivan IV is crowned the first Tsar of Russia. At just 16 years old, he wields absolute power, but his reign will soon be stained with blood. Known as Ivan the Terrible, his paranoia and brutality will bring both territorial expansion and unprecedented suffering to Russia. In the heart of the Congo, the struggle for independence turns tragic. On January 17, 1961, Patrice Lumumba, the nation's first prime minister, is executed by firing squad. His killers, aided by foreign powers, leave his body to be dissolved in acid, erasing any trace of his existence. Lumumba's death silences a leader who fought for unity and independence, and it plunges the Congo into decades of instability and dictatorship. In the grand halls of Paris, world leaders gather to reshape the map of Europe. On January 18, 1919, the Paris Peace Conference begins, aiming to create a lasting peace after World War I. Behind closed doors, alliances are tested and rivalries fester. The treaty it produces will impose harsh terms on Germany, sowing the seeds for the rise of Adolf Hitler and the outbreak of another war. It's a cold January morning in Boston, Massachusetts, when Edgar Allan Poe enters the world. Born on January 19, 1809, Poe will go on to write haunting tales of madness, mystery, and despair. Works like The Raven and Telltale Heart still captivate readers. But Poe's own life mirrors his stories, marked by tragedy, poverty, and an untimely death. He leaves behind a legacy as the master of the macabre. It's a bright morning in Durban, South Africa, but the peace is shattered by an explosion outside a magistrate's court. On January 20th, 1987, a bomb detonates, killing 3 people and injuring 69. The blast is linked to an anti-apartheid resistance group targeting government infrastructure. The event is a stark reminder of the violence and desperation during apartheid. a time when the struggle for freedom often came at a terrible cost. In the early hours of January 21st, 1924, silence falls over Gorky, a small village near Moscow. Vladimir Lenin, the architect of the Soviet Union, takes his final breath. His body will be preserved, and his mausoleum will become a symbol of Soviet power. But with his death comes a battle for control, a fight that Joseph Stalin will win, ushering in an era of terror and totalitarianism. After 63 years on the throne, Queen Victoria, the symbol of an empire where the sun never sets, passes away on January 22, 1901. In Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, her family gathers at her bedside. The Victorian era, defined by industrial progress and imperial ambition, comes to an end. Her death marks the transition to a new century, a world that will soon be reshaped by war and revolution. The ground shakes violently in Shanxi Province, China. It's January 23, 1556, and the deadliest earthquake in recorded history has just struck. Entire villages of cave dwellings collapse, killing an estimated 830,000 people. The disaster reshapes the region and serves as a stark reminder of the destructive power of natural forces. It starts with a glimmer. On January 24, 1848, James W. Marshall finds gold at Sutter's Mill in Coloma, California. Within weeks, the news spreads like wildfire. Tens of thousands of prospectors descend on California, turning the quiet territory into a land of dreams and chaos. The gold rush transforms the state, but it also displaces Native American communities and leaves scars on the land that endure to this day. It's a frigid morning on January 25, 1995, when a Norwegian research rocket is launched to study the Northern Lights. But on Russian radar, the rockets look like a potential nuclear strike. For several tense minutes, the world teeters on the brink of disaster as President Boris Yeltsin considers retaliation. Communication saves the day, but the incident reveals just how close the world remains to the unthinkable, even in a post-Cold War era. The waves crash against the hulls of 11 British ships as they anchor in Port Jackson. It's January 26, 1788, and the First Fleet begins disembarking settlers, convicts, and soldiers onto the shores of a new colony, Australia. Nearby, Aboriginal people watch from the distance, witnessing the arrival that will change their land forever. What begins as a penal settlement becomes the foundation of a nation, though at great cost to its original inhabitants. Inside NASA's Cape Kennedy facility, astronauts Virgil Grissom, Edward White, and Roger Chaffee prepare for a routine test of the Apollo 1 spacecraft. It's January 27, 1967, and tragedy strikes. A fire ignites in the cabin, trapping the crew. Within moments, all three men are dead. The disaster halts America's space race temporarily, but the lessons learned will pave the way for success of future Apollo missions, including the moon landing. It's a crisp winter morning in Florida. Crowds gather to watch the Challenger space shuttle lift off. But 73 seconds into its flight, disaster strikes. A plume of smoke and fire, and the shuttle is gone. On January 28, 1986, 7 astronauts lost their lives, including teacher Krista McAuliffe. The tragedy brings NASA's program to a standstill, forcing critical safety changes and reminding the world of the risks in the pursuit of exploration. For decades, King George III ruled Britain through triumphs and tribulations. The loss of the American colonies, the Napoleonic Wars, and his own mental illness. On January 29, 1820, his long and turbulent life ends in Windsor Castle. He had been king for 59 years, longer than any monarch before him. Though remembered as Mad King George, his reign helped shape Britain into a modern constitutional monarchy. It's the evening of January 30th, 1948, in Delhi, India. Mahatma Gandhi, the spiritual leader of India's independence movement, walks to a prayer meeting. Suddenly, 3 gunshots ring out, fired by Nathuram Godse, a Hindu nationalist. Gandhi collapses, murmuring his final words, "Hey Ram." His assassination shocks the world, silencing a man who led with nonviolence and compassion, but inspiring movements for peace across the globe. A crowd gathers in London on a cold January morning to witness the end of a plot that shook England. On January 31st, 1606, Guy Fawkes, infamous for his role in the Gunpowder Plot, is led to the scaffold. His plan to blow up Parliament and restore Catholic rule had failed, but his name would live on in infamy. The execution is swift and brutal, marking the final act in a conspiracy that forever altered England's political landscape.